Today, we're going to take a look at some of the best robots and individual mechanisms that we've seen this week in the FTC DECODE season. Change their heading by 180 degrees and then be able to still launch in. I'm Coach Pratt. I've been teaching robotics and design for over a decade now. And today, we're going to take a look at a bunch of different intakes, some shooters, as well as some full matches, and take a look at what your team might be up against for this season of FTC DECODE. So first up here, we've got team 17035. And I just want to share out just how effective a rubber band intake can be. If you take a look at this, we've got 3 different rubber band wheels that are set up. And we'll take a look from the start, and it's pretty darn quick to be able to pick up some of these artifacts. I think some teams are kind of writing these off right away without recognizing just how quickly and how effective these things can be as an intake. Then we've got, I wanted to show off team Solar Storm here, because I think that they've done an excellent job at iterating over top of their intake. No longer are they throwing balls in to be able to test them out, but they're now moving their robot forward into it on some wheeled platforms, which I think is a much more realistic situation of what your robot's going to be. It's set up as boot kickers. It's a super wide boot kicker setup, and clearly it's working pretty well. It looks like this is in a bit of a slow motion shot as well. I'd be curious to see what kind of shore hardness these boot kickers are running. They look like they're pretty stiff, but overall this looks like it's going to be a pretty effective intake, having some pretty harsh angles on the side as well. Now we'll take a look at some transfer mechanisms here. I'm not 100% sure which team this is. It's from AABUM1. But I just want to see, they've got these gecko wheels that were used in a previous season from Go Build a Starter Robot, where they slice them up a little bit. You see they come in off their intake, and they push it up, and we can see that it's overall, if we're able to kick it in, it's pretty effective being able to push this ball up and into their hooded section. It also looks like it would be, provided these boot kickers are actually running, this might be a nice way of holding them off before you launch it up into your robot as well. So that's pretty slick. Now, obviously, this doesn't have any setup or capability to do any sort of color sorting, but it still is yet to be seen whether we actually want color sorting inside of our designs or not, or whether it might be more interesting just to have more throughput as time goes by. It's another example of an indexer here from Lawrence Engineering. Sorry, not an indexer. This is a transfer mechanism. They've got some sort of pretty slow wheels running. We've seen this vectored intake before, pushing it around. We see it goes on to, it looks like some servos that are running these sort of TPU, or maybe they're foam rollers. Actually, you know what? Those look like foam paint rollers is what I think those are, from like a hardware store. I'm pretty confident that those are just paint rollers you use for rolling things on the wall. I always love seeing, if that's not, maybe it's not, but I think that would actually be a pretty good material to use inside of this case. Give yourself a little bit of compliance, but push these things in. And if they were to use, say, a faster moving servo, maybe they're intentionally using a slower moving servo here. In any case, we can see it's pretty effective at being able to push this ball up and into their intake. And as a first or second prototype, it's pretty solid. Obviously, some things they're going to do is get some speed going up on this, but for where it's sitting at, overall, pretty nice work on that, Lawrence Engineering. Next up, we've got a shooting mechanism here from FTC 14739. Just want to show this off, be able to show off some of the moving hoods that they've got setting up here. So you can see it's got, looks like a bit of a 4-bar linkage system set up, or maybe just a simple 2-bar linkage there set up to be able to move its hood up and down. We've seen teams design these things with rack and pinions. We've seen teams design these things with gear. At least this is a new one that I personally haven't seen yet. Now, one thing I think we are seeing with this ball pattern is teams that are lobbing these really high in the air is making it more likely, it seems to me, for them to want to fall out. So lobbing these things super high means they're more likely to be jumping up and bouncing. It is something that I think teams are going to have to watch. But there is another shot here from the same team. I think this is just a very cool setup here. They've clearly got their turret set up and working and functioning. It looks like it's being driven by a belt drive back here in this DC motor. There's a belt drive running around. What I am curious about is if they're using a slip ring for the inside for the electronics, or if they are using some sort of cable chain, or if they're just having this loose chain that's able to run it up. I also wonder if this thing is capable of spinning 360 and then has to continuous and can fully spin it on 360, or it has to split itself and then re-rotate back to get that. I think this is going to be an excellent season for having some of the slip ring, but finding a slip ring with such a large center point in the middle, I think is going to be a challenge. It may not be a cheap piece of technology to implement inside your design. We've got another one here from FTC 25690, and I really liked their PVC pipe setup here. You can get from hardware store. I think it's a really creative way of getting a quick prototype set up for constraining their ball as they launch it through those flywheels. So there's not much of grasp on their... Oh, actually, it looks like they've cut the inside of that PVC pipe. We didn't actually check that on the inside here. You can see they've actually cut the inside of that PVC pipe, has a tubing. Super clever, super creative. I love seeing hardware store designs put in, especially when these things work and they fit for well-designed sections as well. It's basically the exact intake you need as well for that ball to be able to push it up through. So I think that is really slick and quite interesting as a piece. I just want to showcase that off from Team Evergreen Techatrons. Nice job on that. Next up here, we've got FRC Programming 5705. They've got a hooded shooter here, and you can see it's launching it quite hard at this sort of makeshift goal they've got set up. The reason I want to show this one off is it's effectively using a gigantic gear to be able to move this. This is effectively a rack and a pinion, but rather than doing just one portion of their hood be the rack and pin, they've made the entire hood itself that rack and pinion system, which is an interesting way of going about it. And I wonder whether there is benefits or detriments to making the entire thing a gear, or if it's just a design choice. I don't think it really is going to add much or take much away, and it may improve some meshing if you are finding that it is not meshing properly, but clearly they're able to get quite a bit of throughput and through power putting on this. It's, again, just always really interesting to see how teams and how some engineers in training are taking some of these designs and running with them to test some of these different things out. I wonder if they could reduce some of their weight by not having such a large gear across the section, but maybe this is another part they're using as a constraining section here. And then last up, we've got Team Tesseract 21689. I think they've got a really cool implement of an autonomous path here where they can start change their heading by 180 degrees and then be able to still launch in while they're looking at the April tag. Super slick, quite quick, and it's still always an impressive thing to see out of that. Plus, it's a cool thing to see trick shots as it is they're mentioning. So I want to be able to share that one off because it just looks, I believe you would say it looks very tough in this case. So last up for this week, I want to share off some full matches here. This is a match out of Lithuania. It looks like they had a KTU sort of, my guess is a scrimmage or robot games is what they call this. And I just want you to take a look at some of these robots. First off, I love seeing lots of plywood being used in this. We saw a good chunk of Lithuanian teams at the World events as well as at the Premier events, and they pulled up pretty well. So Lithuania is a good European region to take a look at to see where some local metas are starting to develop. And I'm actually going to slow this down a little bit because I believe I'm currently running it on too high of a playback speed. Yeah, so this is a bit more accurate to where it is that we're at. We see we've got a team here on the starter robot. You can see this team here has quite a large vertical section for rubber bands going up. And then we've got lots of hooded shooters seen to be some sort of meta that's starting to develop. It is also interesting to see whether teams are successful with the boot kicker or whether they're successful with rubber band intake. The one thing that I like about the rubber band intake, and we can see from this section here versus the boot kicker on this section, is that on this rubber band intake, you can have far more of your chassis set up to be able to intake. I also want to highlight here just how much more defense is going to be played in this season. So we can see that this team member here is pushing this robot out of the way from red to be able to knock out their positioning or potentially knock out their positioning to be able to play that. So playing hard defense is definitely something that teams are going to have to be aware of this season. I want to show another section of an intake here. This is from the NTX. There was a preview event that was posted a couple days ago. And this is another example. The autonomous is worthwhile to watch. I want to make sure I'm not watching this at playback speed that's too fast. The autonomous is something that's worthwhile to take a look at where we can see some of these teams setting up some interesting patterns. We can see this, particularly on the left-hand side here. these black and white robots, they're already kicking out that gate to be able to get a few more points kicked in. And then you can see they've clearly collaborated a bit to be able to grab these spike markers. One thing I do want to highlight at this point is that you really have to make sure your paths are wide enough that you are exiting that launch zone at the end. You do not want to be overlapping any of these, or you don't have to exit the launch zone, but you definitely don't want to be overlapping this white line at the end, because that's worth 3 points towards one of your ranking point earned sections. So if you can move yourself off of that white line, so this red robot here, and then this blue robot here would have won points, but these two robots here would have actually just lost 3 points. Well, not lost, but not got a chance to gain 3 points for their team. And that's a big one for ranking points this season. And then this is another example of defense and hard defense being played. I like seeing this 21-77 going straight in, but I believe that they did foul by running into the other opponent's gate. So you have to really watch that as you're running. So they're playing very aggressive, but they are fouling themselves as they go. But take a look at this blue 21-171. They're playing quite hard defense already. And this is something that I think we're going to see a lot of this season. And we can see over here, we've also got team 23-213 playing a lot of defense against 21-171, pushing up against these robots, pushing them out of the way. Teams are really going to have to be driving these things hard. And I think you're really going to have to design your robot to be a lot more rigid this season. I like seeing the acetal on the sides as a plate. It's quite a rigid build material, provided you can provide enough cross supports in the middle, but it's going to keep yourself electrically grounded across other robots, or not really electrically grounded, but it's going to stop you from being able to transfer charge easily between other robots. And it's also going to give you a little bit of flex. It's almost something you see a bit out of the BattleBots arena, in that in micro weights, having a little bit of compliance to your chassis makes your robot more resilient to impacts than having a super rigid chassis actually does. So having a little bit less rigidity in there to get a little bit of flex might actually end up being pretty beneficial. So we can see these scores are already coming up pretty high. We're probably going to get to about 130, 140 points by the time this is all said and done. And especially for it being so early in the season, it's really interesting to see that. But I wanted to highlight this one just to be able to show this match for just how much defense is being played. And the last one I want to show off here is 150 solo points here from KAP. I believe that this is a team from Romania, but I could be incorrect on that. And I think it's a pretty strong setup at auto. I wanted to show this auto here because we're already seeing teams start to clear out that goal ramp pretty early, and just kind of foregoing those sections of, do we actually want to have the motif, in that right now for their motif, even if they didn't check what it was, they've already gotten a few patterns correct here. Or at least they already have most of the purples likely correct inside this section. It looks like it's purple, green, purple. So just by random chance here, they've actually managed to get 4 out of their 6 there. So that's pretty solid. But I wanted to show this one off because I think it's going to be interesting to see, and when do teams decide to actually open up that gate? And is it worth it to open up that gate to be able to get yourself a little bit more throughput through in that autonomous? And once you've cleared up all 3, 6, 9, 12 balls that have been set up on that section, is it worthwhile for you to be able to go ahead and pick up more as time goes by? Other than that, super interesting. I'd like to know your thoughts in the comments down below on whether you think it's going to be worthwhile for teams to go for the motif, especially in the early season, or if they're going to get more points just to push higher throughput. I'm also curious about when it goes into the actual playoffs, whether the playoff strategy is different from the qualifying strategy. Because once you get into the playoff, ranking points don't matter anymore. So at that point, is it now more worthwhile just to get a higher throughput to be able to get a higher score on there instead of focusing on that pattern section motif? Let me know in the comments down below. If you're looking for more resources, some CAD files, some code snippets, you can consider joining my robotics community down below. And if you want to submit your content for future FTC Fridays, there's also a link to that form down below. And as always, best of luck out there this season.